Welcome back. Let's get started. Right, last week we discussed that a bounce, or I posted on Twitter, right, where if you were to reject this 4,300 area, you would have a sharp drop, right? Apple was either gonna, kind of determine whether we were gonna break over it, right, or we're gonna reject and sell off. So you guys can see that we actually, rejected and had a firm sell off. So this is the bear version that we've been monitoring for weeks. And in this case, right, this 5 of 3 is usually a very, very bearish wave, right? In this case, we would honestly have like pretty red Monday, pretty red Tuesday, sell off in the Fed, and maybe a reversal, right? That's kind of the bear case, which honestly bears have the upper hand. And if the bears were likely to, play ball and, scare the bulls out of their position, they can very likely do so. However, alternatively, right, something that I've noticed is that in the C wave, right, this was your 1, 2, this was your 3, we rejected at the previous area of resistance, and now we've come down for the wave 5. So in this, right, considering that we are getting oversold on the smaller time frames, I can definitely, and getting put heavy, wicks is elevated, right? I can definitely see this being a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wave, with this completing the A before you have that B wave push to the upside before we come down for the C wave. We were, kind of looking for the B wave to, break over this during Apple earnings, but, it kind of got rejected and we sold out. So alternatively, right, if you see a gap down or a gap up with a push higher, right, a dip and rip, then you're likely in a B wave. Alternatively, as I mentioned, if we are in a 5 of 3, then you should honestly, futures should sell overnight, and then we continue selling Monday, Tuesday, and then we're likely in a 5 of 3, right? We finish this sell off, then we have a little relief rally before again another like down into 3,800. So this is the really bearish version. Alternatively, this is something I am monitoring, right? Considering Fed is coming up and we could dip a rip, but again, a 50-point hike could easily, right? This would be the most ideal scenario to play out. So again, those are my two views on the market. And I have, brought this inverse head and shoulders up. It's pretty close to being invalidated, not yet, right? But, just for the memes, I'm just going to leave this up here till futures, break us below this area. But those are the three versions of the market. Again, a sharp, decline that futures selling overnight, right, without a bounce at open, right? Any significant rebound is likely a 5 of 3, and we're likely to, have a very deep sell-off, right, before you have some kind of relief rally before we come back down. Alternatively, as I mentioned, a dip and rip is likely to be a B wave that goes higher before we come down for the C wave. So those are the two scenarios before I discuss this week's watch list. Last week's watch list, right, was honestly a banger, except for AMD calls. Tesla played out, QCOM played out, Crowd played out, JD played out, BA played out. Right, again, it'll be really hard to top that last week's watch list, but we can try. Right, I'm going to try my best to find you some place. The first one I have is Baidu. The reason for that is since JD played out, I think Baidu's kind of lagging, right? This is kind of what the chart for HSI would look like, right? Kind of, have a wave 2 sell-off before 3, 4, 5, right? And then ABC, you can see that bigger picture. You finish 5 waves, right? We're looking for the B wave. This was your A, this was a B, going higher for a C. So in Baidu's case, right, you can see that it did gap up, right? So I'm going to say you can see that the ideal entry is 118 to 120, right? Fill this gap, close this area, right, before we go up for 3, 4, 5. So that's why I have Baidu calls on here, right? 135, 150 targets. Alternatively, right, if this, this gap doesn't hold as ample support, then Baidu can, do something like this. So, you can't rule that out at all, right? This can be a B wave. If you want to wait for max confirmation, you can wait for, 140 to break before it goes to like 160, 170. That's if you're a very safe trader. But anyway, that's the reason I have Baidu calls on the watch list, right? The next one I have is BKNG. It does have earnings coming up, so you have to be careful. But this, fifth wave completed here, had a massive sell-off. So we know this was a pretty, start of a large correction move, right? Pushed higher for the B wave. And now you can see that it's kind of gone sideways for a month, right? I think that the earnings should be a decent enough catalyst, right, for it to, start this third wave sell-off. It aligns with earnings coming out 4th of May, right? Again, a break of this, you can see that it does have a gap to fill at 2070. So that's easily like 100-point, gap. So that's a pretty good risk reward. So that's the reason I have BKNG puts on here, right? Below 2170, 2070, and 940 are my targets, right? Again, stop would be if it breaks this high, right? That's the ultimate stop, but I did have a safer stop, right? I am assuming that it's likely, you can see it is on support. So it's likely to, bounce off of this, go sideways before it comes lower. So when it breaks into this gap, right, that's when you kind of take it with a stop at 2200. So that's what I have for BKNG. That's the second play on the watch list, right? The next one is actually GM. The reason for that is there's actually bullish divergence, right, on GM that is forming. You guys can see that here. And you can see that if I count the waves, right, you can see actually, one sec, probably have a better chart out here. Yeah, you guys can see that this is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in a wave 1, wave 2. Again, this is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 completing in a wave 3. So I am looking for that fourth wave bounce, right? Confirmation would be if we broke over 39.5, right? This wedge would break and then, we come to retest prior resistance 46. That's the reason you can see that the bullish divergence in a wave 4 that I have here. The targets are 42, 45, give it 2 to 3 weeks, so we stop at 39. So that's the reason I have GM calls on there, right? Alternatively, right, if we do break this low at 37, then we're likely, headed lower to, I'd say 33, right? And then 30 bucks. So a break of the low would mean that we are likely headed lower, but I do think that this area should hold the support, right? Go sideways and then, push higher for the wave forward. So that's the reason I have GM calls on there, right? The next one I have is Tesla. So for Tesla, I have actually both a bull case and a bear case because it, could go either way. You guys can see that we did, go reject the previous area of resistance, right, on a wave 4. And then that is honestly the perfect area for a wave 4 to end, which could be the start of a wave 5 and wave 3, just like the ES, right? Just like ES, Tesla honestly is likely to, follow ES. And that's the reason I have two scenarios, right? Depending on the way ES works out, Tesla's likely to work out the same. If it's likely to follow the market, you can see I do have a wave B, right? A dip to, I'd say, 860, 850 before it moves higher for the wave C. Alternatively, if it broke the low at 850, then it's likely to, come back down to support at 768. So those are the two scenarios on Tesla. Last week, we discussed that a break below 980 would flush it to 800, right? That's kind of what happened this week, right? You can watch to see whether Tesla below 850 goes to 762, or if it holds this area and breaks over 911, right? You can see this is the area it's been rejecting, right? If I drew a trend line here, you can see it still has not closed a 4-hour candle over this area. A close of a 4-hour candle over this area will take you directly to, $1,000. So that's the reason I have both bull and bear case on Tesla. They're likely to provide good risk to reward scenarios based on how it works out. So that's what I have for Tesla, right? The next one I have on my watch list is actually Walmart. I don't know if you guys saw my Twitter, but I did have it selling off for a wave 4. So far that's worked out. So that's the reason I feel confident that it should have enough momentum, right, to complete this wave 4 and start heading higher for the wave 5, right? Finish off this fifth wave to the upside. I have calls over 155 with a target of 160, 165, right? It's a boomer stock, so you have to buy like a month or two of time, right? It moves pretty slowly. So that's what I have for Walmart. You can see we broke down from this wedge, right? Use it as support, propelled higher. Again, we're making a higher low before we go upside. So that's the reason I have Walmart calls on here. The next one I have is actually Zoom, right? So again, on the weekly, I want to go to the weekly time frame because if you draw a trend line, right, you can see that this trend line is holding as support and this one is kind of holding as resistance. Not perfect, right? Used the support, moved higher, then broke down, retested it, failed, and now we're going lower. So that's the reason I think that if Zoom broke this low of 95, right, where previous low was, it's likely to come back down to 73, right, where this trend line holds a support. Alternatively, right, if this low of 94 doesn't break, you can definitely do an ABC like this before it moves lower. So you can just wait to see if support breaks, move down to the lower trend line. If this holds and you see a really bullish candle, then you can play the C wave to the upside. So that's what I have for Zoom, right? And the next one I have is Citi. So the reason for Citi is that you guys can see that this was your ABC again in an ABC, and it's heading towards the 1.618 fib. So as long as the 1.618 fib at 47 holds as a low, right, you'll be able to see this B wave to the upside. So that's kind of what I'm watching for on Citi. If ES plays out the B wave, then banks likely can play out their B wave as well. So I kind of wanted to play on that, and that's the reason I have Citi calls on here. But a break below 47, you can see that Citi has a gap of 43. So if it breaks 47, you can just as easily play puts on Citi. So that's what I have for Citi for this week. And the last one is Intel. The reason for Intel is you guys can see that if I go to the daily chart, right, you can see that it was in this giant, parallel formation. And then on earnings, right, you can see that we've pretty much closed on this area, this trend line support. If I move this higher, you can see we actually closed below that area. So most of the cases, you guys can see that this area is immediately followed by a bullish candle. So if Intel, right, if Intel cannot close back into this trend line, then it's broken this massive 2-year sideways channel, right? And then Intel is likely, likely to flush lower to 39, 35. So that's kind of what I have for Intel. However, as I mentioned, you can see every time it's closed below, it has been bought up. If it's bought up, right, that it's likely to have a bullish week and we can probably go retest 49. So bull case to 49, bear case, if it does not get bought up, it's going to have a very deep flush. So that's the reason I have Intel on the watch list, is worth keeping an eye on. So that's what I have for this week. Thank you so much. And I'll see you guys next week.